guys, welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face for radio and a voice for print. Professor Scott Galloway is an orator, a professor of, I believe, business and economics or, marketing, I guess it is. And he's a podcast host. He's an author. He does a lot of different things. And he was on the Adam Carolla show, and one of you sent me a link and said, hey, this Professor Galloway is kind of delving in our area and speaking to the realities for men, and that why, online dating and using the apps is pretty toxic for men to use. Those are exactly the words he used. And it's not that he's adding anything new to the conversation, but what I think is interesting, like Adam Carolla is one of the larger podcasts out there. I think he's second or third, or at least he used to be second or third to Joe Rogan's podcast. So he gets a lot of listeners. So a lot of normies, so to speak, are listening into him. And so I don't think he's adding anything to the conversation for us per se, but he is validating what we've been saying now for years. And it's another instance of the proliferation, me and my big words, the proliferation of this information out to the normies, the people that think that we're all crazy for saying, hey, we don't want to date and get into the market and things like that. So we're going to listen to, it's only a 2-minute long video. We'll listen to that real quick. He's born in 64. So he's 58, I guess. Is that right? 58. Professor of marketing at New York University School of Business. He's a public speaker, author, podcast, entrepreneur. So he's got a much bigger voice than myself or even anybody else in the manosphere does. Well, this is what he shared, and this is from Professor Scott Galloway on Adam Carolla show, Why Online Dating is So Toxic to Men. And we're going to listen through this because, again, I think he brings up some valid points that we talk about, but he puts it in a way that maybe if you're struggling to find content with people that explains how you feel about the dating market, maybe he's more palatable, more professional than some doofus on the internet like I am. Maybe this is a link or something that you could share, or look up this interview with him on Adam Carolla and snip out whatever portion of it. We're going to play this through here for you.
No, it doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you're an asshole, over the long term, people don't want to mate with you. And the problem is now 1 and 2 relationships post-COVID are beginning online. And it's very hard to demonstrate to intelligence and kindness and pheromones and humor and vibe. The wonderful thing about sexuality is there's so many weird things that come into it. Smell. I've always thought if you can make a woman laugh, she'll go on a date with you. You can't get that across online. The only thing you can get across online is kind of how rich you are, your credentials. So
let me just pause him right there. So he says, the normal interactions that you have with human beings, and I can attest to this. I'm 5'7" if I wear thick socks, right? I joke about this all the time. I don't know, I haven't measured my height in a long time since the doctor, but I'm around 5'6" maybe. I'm bald. I'm not in exceptionally good shape, although I'm okay. I'm heavier now than I have been in the past when I was dating. But I used to do fine in dating. Why? Because instead of being a dating app, you'd be going to an event, like maybe a pub, or you might be going to a club or a bar or an outing or meeting with friends, and you could share your personality. You could be a smart ass, you could be funny, you could be sarcastic, you could be dry, you could be stoic, you could be intelligent. All these different things come across. And this is where, a lot of times the quote unquote pickup artists, they're always talking about, oh, you need to send her negative comments to put her off her toes, and you need to make her laugh and do this to show high value and blah, 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 blah. Well, some of that is right. Some of that is right, and some of it does work. But the problem is you can't show that on a dating app. So now so many people, especially the younger people, are on dating apps that they don't even put in any effort into the real world nor give you a chance. And none of that comes across a dating app. So in many cases, and there's been a couple times, in many cases, men dating. Let me split up my wording so it doesn't sound confusing. In many cases, men dating in the past were dating women that they might not have normally been able to be with, but they had something interesting about them, or they carried themselves well, or they were able to express value. In my case, a few times, I actually have dated women that were much taller than me. I think the tallest woman I've dated is 5'10" or 5'11", And these were women that would comment on my height. Like I remember one of them, we were sitting in kind of the high bar stools at a bar, and I sat down and was hanging out with friends, and there was a girl and another girl or something was going on over here. And I just asked her to pass me the salt, and I sprinkled the salt on my bar, what do you call it, coaster, I guess. I sprinkled the salt on my coaster and handed it back, and I said, thanks. And she said, do you always salt your coaster? And I said, yeah, usually before eating them, or if I don't want my beer glass to stick to the coaster. And I put the beer glass on there, and the salt keeps a layer so that when you pick up your beer glass, it doesn't stick to the coaster from the humidity and a little bit of pressure on it. And she said, oh, that's really cool. And I said, I know lots of bar tricks. You ought to ask me sometime. And then I went back to my friends. And, after a few back and forths, she turned to face me a little bit. I matched her body, like her body positioning, and to make sure that I didn't, show that I was overly interested, whatever. And you go through all the kind of the tricks of the trade that you learn when you're dating or in the dating market. And before you know it, I get her number. And when we go to stand up, she said, oh, you're short. And I said, no, I'm not. You're just ridiculously tall, but I'll still let you take me, or I'll still take you out. And she laughed, and we shared numbers, and I ended up going out on dates with her. None of that can be shared on a dating profile. What she does is now, if she's a 5'10" or 5'11", she demands 6'3", because she wants a 6-footer, but she also likes to wear heels, and demands 6 figures, 6 inches, and all the rest. We know how that goes. So he is correct that all the nuances that are shared normally in dating are completely gone.
If you went to MIT and you just started a KKR and your Rolex accidentally slips into your profile picture, you're going to do just fine on Tinder.
You used to be able to be fine on Tinder. I think he's even off by a couple of years in the dating market now. Just showing that you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or even a PhD and a Rolex in your photo, that'll get her to pause. But if you're still only 5'6" or 5'7", and you're not in exceptionally good shape or exceptionally good looking, she will continue to move on because they have so many choices now. So I don't even think that's enough anymore to get the attention.
But the thing is, women have much finer filters. Women are much choosier than men. If you go into a large room of men and women, when there's alcohol involved, the majority of the men would sleep with the majority of the women. The majority of the women would sleep with none of the men.
And this is true. And I've actually literally used hey, Professor Scott, if you're watching me, big fan. I've actually used this. I've said this exactly. A woman can walk into a bar and just randomly say, how many guys would like to take me home? And if she's relatively good looking, most of the guys would be like, yeah, all right, I got nothing else to do. Or it's better than playing, I don't know, Diablo 4. And so, yeah, they would. Where if a man walked into a bar of women, even if he's a 10, even if he's Henry Cavill, and he walked in and all those women are sitting there, he goes, anybody want to go home and sleep with me? Just the social pressure alone of other women looking around being like, I don't want to seem easy. I don't want to get called out, or I don't want to be seen as the town doorknob where everybody takes their turn. A lot of women would say no. And number two, they'd say, he sounds very desperate. He must not have a lot to offer. And so they also wouldn't. So there's a huge difference to this, but he is correct on this.
And so what you have is women can apply those filters online. And what you have is a mating inequality that's greater than income inequality. And that is, there's 50 men on Tinder, 50 women on Tinder. 46 of the women will show all of their attention to just 4 men. And you think, well, what's the problem with that? They're all interested in the same person. Well, the 5% of men who are now having 80% of the sex engage in partial polygamy. They're not encouraged to establish long-term relationships. It doesn't lead to good behavior. This
is exactly what we talk about over and over again. Is it the men's fault or the women's fault? Well, if 46 women go after those men in a normal, let's say normal world, even 20 years or 30 or 40 years ago, the same thing held true. 46 out of those 50 women would go towards the 4 men. Here's the difference. Those 4 men would be looking for, because the women wouldn't just walk up to them and sleep with them. The women would walk up and say, I want a relationship. I'd like to be engaged. Eventually, I'd like to get married. Eventually, I'd like to have a family. And so that guy would say, okay, can she cook? Is she going to be a good mom? Is she going to be a good role model? Do I find her attractive? Is she the most attractive I can get? Is she young? Is she firm? All the other things that men look for. That was the difference. What changed in the markets that threw most men out of the market was the women's sexual availability. Those women will now say, I will sleep with this guy to try to win him, or I just want to be with a guy like this. And so they make themselves sexually available to that guy. And so what does he do? He says, this is great for me. I don't have to get married. I don't have to select a woman that's going to be a good mother. I don't have to select a woman that's even compatible with me. I can go out with the one with the big tatas and the curvy waist and whose body style and looks that I like. I have to put in zero effort. I don't have to even get to know her. I'll just take her home. I'll get my physical needs met. Good enough. Now, can that lead to long-term problems for men? Yes, it can, if they can't separate the narcissistic need of attention and validation from women, which is what a lot of pickup guys go through. They think if they can sleep through 100 women, that makes them great men. And that men that don't have any women, they're all like worthless men. The problem is those men are still validating themselves by women. And so if you can separate that out and you know the difference between the two, hey, it's just like an all-you-can-eat buffet for these guys, except they never gain weight. So there's no need for them to ever settle down. And so these same men, when they're in their 50s, they're dating 20-year-olds. When they're in their 60s, they're dating 30-year-olds or sleeping with. And when they're in their 70s, maybe their libido shot and they don't care, and they're a retired confirmed bachelor, hooking up in the geriatric ward of the hospital or whatever, right? So that's how this works. So there's no incentive for them to ever settle down. And so it becomes 46 women betting 4 men betting 46 women. The men get what they want. The women never get what they want. And then when they want to complain about the men, they're not only talking, they're talking about their interactions with those 4 men, but they say all men, because the other 46 men are invisible to them. And so what's happened is, with this easy access to the bedroom and everything else, that's what's throwing everything off. Were that to change, were women to say, you know what, I'm not going to sleep with a dude unless he's going to date me long term, and he's going to, all of a sudden, reality sets back in, and women that are 6s are dating men that are 6s or 7s, and vice versa, and the hypergamous ladder rearranges in the correct way. But because everything is casual hookup culture now, that's not the way things work. So he's spot on this, but we've said this many times. But again, it's nice to hear it from a larger voice that comes from a different background, stating the same things that we see as obvious for years.
The bottom half of men online, in terms of attractiveness, literally are shut out of the market. They get validation they have no worth. No women will even swipe back. They have to match 200 times to get one coffee. It takes 5 coffees to actually have one coffee. So they have to swipe right, connect with 1,000 people to get one coffee. So they get very upset. They get validation that they have no value to women. And you end up in a scenario where there's less household formation, less mating, we're going into a birth decline, because the random encounters with people in person creates different types of attraction. I wasn't attracted to him or her initially, but I got to know them. I found them funny. I like the way their body language is. I like the way they treat their parents, whatever it might be. People fall in love, and there's less encounters, less randomness now. And
this is exactly right. And this is what we're seeing. If you think about it, almost all the countries that are seeing a decline in the birth rate are the ones that are now more casual with sleeping with each other. I mean, you don't see this in the Muslim world. You don't see it down in Africa. Where are we seeing it? We're seeing it in all the westernized countries where the feminism and the women can act like men, and you can't shame women for sleeping around and having a high body count. That's exactly where we're seeing a lot of this decline. Even in Japan, which is not quite as far as crazy as the West, same thing with South Korea, they're still going through the same things. Because women now not only do they want feminism, they want to make their own money, they don't want to have to rely upon a man. And the reason why they don't want to rely upon a man is because they don't have one. Because they're putting their time and their energy into sleeping with or trying to get these best ones. Those best men don't want them, and so they say, I don't want to fall back and have to rely on just an average guy. I'm better than that. The narcissism and the entitlement of women in this generation is what's directly leading to all the problems we're having. And men can't fix this. I mean, yes, I suppose if all the men out there went and got plastic surgery and broke their legs and made themselves 6 foot tall and good looking, and they all went out and got high paying jobs, you could say, well, those men would do okay. But would they, though? Because it used to be women only wanted the sixes, 6-figure income, 6 inches, 6-pack. Now they've gone up to 7. There are women online. I put a video on Twitter the other day. You can follow me at Bachelor Joker. I'm posting stuff there all day long while I look at the news. There are women out there saying, look, I want a $500,000 engagement ring or a $100,000 engagement ring, or don't talk to me unless you make less than $300,000. It's not 6 figures anymore. It's creeping up on 7. It's not the 6 inches, it's the 7 inches. It's not the 6-pack, it's the 8-pack. And so even if all men were to step up the bar and become, all these women want 6 foot tall, attractive. If every man became Henry Cavill tomorrow, women would start saying, I want him to be 6'6", and I want him to be a trillionaire. There's never enough for them. The only way this changes is if women get their expectations back in line. How do they do that? By not giving themselves freely to these top dogs. And are we going to shame the men that are taking advantage of it? I mean, how can you? Again, that's like the fat kid in the candy store, except he never gains weight. He can just enjoy as much candy as he wants. Do you blame him, or do you blame the store owner that's giving away the free frickin' candy? That's really who's at fault. Now, I think either group could stop what they're doing and it would all change overnight. But maybe the way to correct this is for men to find stoicism, and for men maybe to find religion and find a different purpose in life than women. And then these players that are out there that have women after women, maybe they start saying, you know what, I'm only going to be with 10s, and I'm going to turn away the 9s and the 8s and the 7s, and maybe that would fix some of it. I don't know. But I can tell you this, the online stuff is throwing women into chaos, and it's making a lot of men unhappy.
Really hurts the bottom 90% of men in terms of attractiveness. And it just makes it a little bit worse for all women in general, because they all want the same man online, and that dude has too much opportunity. So we end up in this kind of Porsche polygamy meets mating inequality that's resulting in lower household formation.
So his term that he uses a couple times that I think is kind of interesting, he calls it Porsche polygamy. And what he's basically saying is the guy with the Porsche gets all the women. He gets to share all the women, and the women understand that, and they're okay with it because he's a top man. And because of this, the women mistake sleeping with a high-value man as being desired by a high-value man, and then deserving a high-value man. And we've called them alpha widows for the longest time. So is he keying in on what we've known? Yes. Has he known this for as long as we have? Maybe. But the point is, again, this is on Adam Carolla's show, a much bigger show. And these discussions are happening on Adam Carolla and on Joe Rogan's podcast and in other places. The media, the news has started to pick up on it a little bit. Now, of course, they could never say anything to be supportive of men. So instead they say, why aren't there enough high-value men, or why aren't men earning enough? They're putting it back on us instead of saying maybe women should, get out of the job market and stop being diversity hires and getting all the positions instead of men. So even they're touching on it. And what will eventually happen? Things will just fall off a cliff. It's not going to likely happen in my generation. It'll be the generation, either the millennials behind us or the Gen Z, that are going to really have the difficult times fall on you. So what do you do in the meantime? This is where passport bros have found, hey, you know what? I can go to these other countries and have luck if I really want this. This is where guys going their own way and doing their own thing and just saying, you know what? I'm okay without a girlfriend, or I'll just have male friends. And then if I need to feel the loving embrace of a woman for $100 an hour or $200 or $300 an hour or whatever, I'll save up and I'll purchase that because we've been told that this is okay. and that women feel fine with it and it's not shaming to them. So, okay, I'll take advantage of that. Times have changed. You know, the days of the kind of nuclear family, they still exist, but man, are they hard to find. You know, they're becoming the unicorn, and the message is getting out there more and more. It's interesting. I think it's a good thing to see that outside communities are picking up on, and I mean just outside areas outside of the silo of men talking about these issues. I think it's good that it gets out there, but until things actually change, nothing will change. And it'll continue just as we are, even if, as all the women say, yep, I'm really sad and that was a bad mistake by me and I wish I could do it over again. The next generation of young women coming up are making the same mistakes as the older ones because they're young and they don't worry about it until it's too late, time after time after time. So this is just the new normal. It is what it is. Guys, I'm going to be probably streaming Baldur's Gate 3 over on Locals this evening. Sometime around 7 or 8 o'clock. I put 7 o'clock. I hope I'll have time to jump in. I played the beta for 15 hot minutes back a year and change ago, and it was still very incomplete, so I just said, I'll wait till the final comes out. It's now out. I'm going to jump on there. So if you're a supporter over on Locals, make sure to check that out today, and we'll see you in the next one.